heard back from them yet. And when we come back, QR codes will be required to get around in certain areas of Paris during the Olympic Games. David Vives speaks to a lawyer about why this is raising red flags. And in the NBA, and in that regard.
That's not what she's saying now. She's talking about he was bigger and blocking the way. It's all the Me Too buzzwords. She said there was a power imbalance of power for sure. My hands were shaking so hard. She said she blacked out.
Normally, I would think that if you contradict the previous statement, it would. And I don't know if they would get the case thrown out normally or what happens. I mean, what's the normal process for something like this?
Simple. An ethical prosecutor would never bring the case. You know, you need a witness, usually in a prosecution of a case, depending on the crime, but this style of crime, you need a witness, Michael Cohen. You also need a victim. And in this instance, they've quasi-portrayed Stormy Daniels as the victim, even though there are no actual victims to the crime charge. But it looks good in front of a jury. But if both of those individuals, as witnesses and victims, have been caught lying multiple times under oath to Congress, to the media, to courts of law, to prosecutors, this should never have gone forward. And if you just take Stormy Daniels at her own words, she's a victim. No, I'm not a victim. Nothing happened. Everything was fine. And then also the defense, I think, has put this up a couple times during the testimony. She wrote a letter through her counsel in 2017 or whatever it was, 15, I can't remember the date, where she said there was never any affair between her and President Trump. So if there was no affair, whether it was consensual or not, it's factually and legally impossible for you to have been sexually harassed in any way, shape, or form. And now Alvin Bragg puts you on the witness stand to say, I was just kidding. I lied in my letter. My lawyer dishonest in the media, but please believe me now.
You know, you mentioned a few times that it's important to have a victim if you want to bring a charge. And I know Trump's been saying that. He was saying that as well on the undervaluing of the Mar-a-Lago case, that it was a case with no victim. There was no aggrieved party. I mean, help me understand that, because it seems that some of these cases are lacking a victim and they're going forward regardless. I mean, does that normally not happen?
It never happens. It's against the law. It's against your constitutional oath as a prosecutor. The crimes that have victims, like the crimes that they are charging Donald Trump with, require under the law that there actually be a victim. And as you highlighted in the civil case in New York, there literally was no financial fraud victim. So there couldn't have been financial fraud. Put that aside. Let's go to this case here at hand in New York, where let's remind your audience real quick how this is a two-tier system of justice. Hillary Clinton, back in 2016, utilized campaign finance dollars to go out and pay for Christopher Steele's dirty dossier and hid those campaign finance dollar utilization as a legal expenditure. That's an actual crime with the victim. The FEC and the DOJ say it's a crime. She was never prosecuted because the same people that wanted to politically weaponize DOJ and FBI are now a part of the process with the Donald Trump case, and they gave her a pass. But instead of doing the same to Donald Trump, who, by the way, is actually on better factual footing because he used his own money for an actual legal expense, and the DOJ and FEC have said in writing that there is no crime that Donald Trump committed, no victim, hence no charges. This district attorney took it upon himself after combining forces with the DOJ.
Limitations as well. But, you know, you talked about using campaign finance money for this type of stuff, and Trump used his own money. This is where I think the story is getting lost in a lot of people. I mean, as an investigative journalist, where I have to investigate finances and lawsuits and stuff like that, you know, it's a part of my work. I understand that just because somebody maybe signed an NDA or had a hush money thing doesn't mean they actually did anything. Because when you're dealing with big corporations or major names, I'm not accusing Stormy of this, but I know that there's a really corrupt element behind it where typically if someone just accuses a major corporation of a crime, it's cheaper for them to just pay him off. And even a lot of the insurance houses, they have legal insurance. They just pay people. And there's dirty people who just take advantage of that. And so, I mean, on the note of the quote-unquote hush money and the NDA, like, how does that tie into Trump? I mean, because it sounds like there's a lot of murky water in terms of how this is being framed, where on one side they're saying that Trump never even knew about it. I know Avenatti is even coming out and criticizing Cohen and Stormy on this. I mean, how do I make sense of this, Cash? It's getting to the point where it's so convoluted it's hard to make sense of.
Right. I think you have to rewind the tape and just look at the facts and the law. This case has nothing to do with hush and nothing to do with money. It is not a hush money case. That's what the mainstream media wants you to call it because it sounds licentious. It's, oh wow, what hush money? Who's getting paid off? Where was the deal under the table? Who broke the law where? It already puts Donald Trump on a negative footing in terms of constitutional due process, but that's the way they wanted it framed, and it sounds sexy. Now, in terms of the law and the facts, the reason it's not a hush money case is because, don't take my word for it, don't even take Stormy Daniels' word for it, and don't even take Michael Cohen's word for it. How about Bob Costello, Michael Cohen's lawyer, who testified to the weaponization subcommittee in Congress, I think this week, under oath, literally said that when he, Bob Costello, was representing Michael Cohen for the last 3, 4, 5 years, and he, Bob Costello, walked Michael Cohen into the United States District Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice, he advised his client, Michael Cohen, to tell the truth, and everything will work out. And what did Michael Cohen tell prosecutors? Bob Costello's testimony? I have absolutely nothing on Donald Trump. I have absolutely nothing on Donald Trump. That statement was made 10 times by Bob Costello. And he said Michael Cohen told the FBI the same exact thing in his presence. Obviously, Bob Costello was Michael Cohen's lawyer, and he would know that. So if you take that singular fact alone, there is no hush money. There is no deal. Michael Cohen, if you take his witness stand and believe even a piece of what he says, he has already admitted he paid Stormy Daniels himself.
That's right.
He did it in the hopes of getting in the good graces of Donald Trump. That's an action and an intent that Michael Cohen took that Donald Trump had no participation in. So Donald Trump could not have been leveraging or conducting a quid pro quo or saying, here's a hush money deal, I need you to go pay this person. Michael Cohen has admitted that didn't happen. Michael Cohen's lawyer has admitted under oath now that Michael Cohen, when he spoke to federal agents, told them, I have absolutely no information on this case for you. That's why DOJ never charged him.
Yeah. I mean, the whole case seems to have issues like this. You know, there was something else I want to ask you about. A paralegal just testified that Alvin Bragg's team, the prosecutor, had deleted 3 pages of phone records between Michael Cohen and Stormy Daniels, and they didn't even tell Trump's legal team. I know there's some really serious accusations around saying, oh, it's a crime to delete evidence. I mean, what is the actual impact of that? What is the actual significance of that?
You know, this is monumental. And this is where I ask, where are all my former public defender colleagues? Where's the ACLU? No, seriously, where are all the raging liberals who say the Constitution should be applied to all equally? I stood for that in court for years. And the worst crime you can commit as a prosecutor, literally the worst crime, there's actually 2, lying to a judge and deleting or withholding evidence. They're on par with each other. They are both crimes. They're both actual felonies, punishable by more than 1 year in prison.
So you're saying Alvin Bragg committed a crime by doing that, if it's true?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Every one of his prosecutors that participated in the deletion of evidence, not only did they delete it, they could have said, hey, we were looking through 1 gigabyte of information. We sent it out to a company to help us source it. And judge, by accident, they deleted X, Y, and Z, not our fault. And been upfront about it, right? Stuff like that happens. It's not ideal, but it happens. What they did here was they themselves, Bragg, deleted it. They withheld it from the court. They withheld it from Donald Trump, violating his constitutional due process rights. And then they lied about it because when you know something to be the truth and you don't disclose it, that's a lie, especially before a judicial officer. Defendant in the case. I've literally never heard of that in my entire career as a prosecutor or public defender. But what other people can do is raise awareness to it. And I think that's what Donald Trump is leading the effort in. By going out there every day and talking to the media and reading what the media printed about the gag order and reading about what other commentators in the media are writing about the gag order, legal experts. I think what you're seeing is a massive civics lesson for America to say, and look, most Americans don't have to be constitutional experts, nor should they. They've got lives to live. and families to take care of. But this is an important lesson because they're saying if they're going to silence Donald Trump, a presidential candidate for the United States of America, whether I agree with him or not, what happens if they do it to me or my neighborhood or my family or my community? So I think every person that talks about it raises the awareness. And now it's caught on such fire that even the fake news media is saying, okay, actually, this is one step too far. And when they admit that, you know you've rung the bell. And I think that's what Donald Trump has done in a brilliant fashion, because really what he should be able to do every day, and we did this with defense counsel and defendants all the time, walk out and talk to the media. Tell them everything that happened. Give them your opinion. That is your constitutional right to free speech that no judge in America can truncate. But this one did.
Yeah, one of our viewers is asking if there's anything they can do to get maybe elected representatives to react to this. Is there anything that can be done from that level?
I think you're going to see that. And I think you've seen some of that. There have been some political representatives from Congress, like Byron Donalds and Corey Mills, were there in the courthouse with President Trump the other day, voicing their opinion to the media. Maybe some more folks will go down there. I think you can call your congressional offices and senators and say, hey, I want you to speak on this. And enough people do, they probably will. I don't think you're going to get maybe the select radical few in Congress to say that this gag order is actually constitutional. I mean, just look at it this way. If Joe Biden were on trial for sexual misconduct against Tara Reade, and the judge told Joe Biden, you can't go out there and talk about your case, what would the mainstream media's response be?
Yeah, you wouldn't hear the end of it. On that note too, again, as we were discussing, the judge in the Manhattan case, he's threatening to throw Trump in jail if he violates the gag order again. I mean, he's saying Trump has violated the gag order like 10 times. I can understand from one point, if you're a judge and there's nothing you can do to maintain order, maybe you'd have to take that step.
Ridiculous.
But I was looking at the actual context of what he's accusing Trump of. And in some of the actual transcripts, Trump is being accused of the judge of contempt for looking down or looking away, like his body language stuff. I mean, I can understand the tweets maybe, but like body language, I mean, it seems bizarre to me. But I want to ask you, Cash, I mean, is it even possible to throw a former president in jail? Like, how does that even happen? Because they have Secret Service detail and, who knows what else.
I mean, look, the Secret Service is professionals. They perform all sorts of logistical lifts that you couldn't think possible. But President Trump should never be put in prison or jail, especially not for contempt or any of these trumped-up charges from the Biden administration. But I think what he is doing is continuing the unethical conduct that shows why he should not be presiding over this case. As you pointed out, as an investigative journalist who actually looked at the contempt orders and the underlying documentation, there is no basis for contempt. But what does it do? It gives him the mainstream media, the headline, Donald Trump charged with contempt. Donald Trump, found liable for contempt 10 different times, so they can run with that narrative. It allows his daughter to go out and continue to raise money to the tune of millions, which she's already admitted to through the company which she's the CEO of, and raises money for the likes of
daughter, right? You're talking about
the judge's daughter. Yeah, excuse me. And so it gives them the headlines that they need. And this judge is just feeding more ammunition into that machine. This judge will not put Donald Trump in jail. This judge will not imprison Donald Trump for any of these contempt violations, because this judge knows the second he does that, Donald Trump has the immediate right to appeal that. Unlike the rest of the case, once you issue an incarcerative sentence, the appeals issue becomes immediate, and the Court of Appeals, even as crazy as New York is, will come back and say, not only can you not hold him in contempt because these gag orders are unconstitutional, but you need to immediately release him. And it will delay his trial, and the judge sees that the political headwinds are going against him in every single point of this case. And so not only is it unconstitutional, it shouldn't happen, and the Secret Service should never have to do it.
Well, that's actually a really good point. I hadn't thought about that element, that when they go to appeal, Trump's probably going to bring up all the conflicts of interest of the judge, and it's going to bring the integrity of that entire case on the table. Do you think that's what would happen were they to appeal it on that?
I think everything's fair game when the client you are representing has had his civil liberties removed, meaning they've put him in prison or jail. And so once that happens, it triggers a whole set of different constitutional protections.
So
It's
dirty.
not like you're saying, hey, judge, I fined him $1 million. We'll get to this later. We can stay the order. No big deal. It's a totally different scenario. Judge, my client's physically in jail for something that is completely unconstitutional. And not only do they get the state court involved, right? This is a federal issue. So they can take this matter to the federal court because constitutional due process stems from the Constitution, which is a federal matter. A state court has a right to adjudicate state issues. So now you're taking this and saying, wait a second, we know the New York system might be rigged, but what if we take this to federal court and a federal judge trounces the gag order, the judge, the conflicts of interest? I mean, it could be a complete and total annihilation of this case by a judge, which would be the last thing the Democrats and Biden want.
I feel like they're trying so hard to get a guilty verdict that they're ignoring the process, and it looks like it's helping Trump instead of harming him, which I think they originally thought it would harm him. I want to hear your thoughts. I mean, how do you see the impact of these cases on the Trump campaign? Has it helped Trump or has it hurt him?
I mean, I think you're seeing Americans respond resoundingly in one direction, that it helps them for the reasons you pointed out. It's not a popularity contest. It's not a do I like or dislike Donald Trump. It's a question of, do I want to live in a constitutional republic where everyone has due process rights, or do I want to live in a weaponized system of justice where the two-tier system of justice is a deep state's weapon of choice for its political opponents? It's not a right-wing conspiracy anymore. And every single one of these cases, Georgia, New York, Florida, Washington, D.C., has its own different version of the Biden fingerprints when it comes to the unlawful prosecution of Donald Trump. It's one after the other, after the other, after the other. And it's been well documented on Epoch, brilliantly so. And the readers and audience that you have are going out to their communities and saying, wait a second, those guys weren't lying about Russiagate was a rigged job. Those guys weren't lying about the 51 Intel letter. Those guys weren't lying when they said Joe Biden actually possessed classified documents, unlike President Trump. The system has been repeatedly stacked against them, but the mainstream media has done the bidding of those very deep state operatives to say, oh, those guys over there are just lying. So I think what Donald Trump does cleverly every time and every day he's in front of the podium, in front of one of these cases, is he educates more and more Americans and he says, this is happening to me right now, but they're actually coming after you because the FBI has already admitted to going after parents at school board meetings. The FBI has already admitted to going after Catholics and calling them domestic terrorists. That's what they've admitted to so far. By the way, if you were associated with January 6th in any way, the FBI has labeled you a domestic terrorist. As a former terrorism prosecutor who actually manhunted terrorists, that is one of the most offensive things I've ever heard. But those types of political labels are what America is turning off and tuning out of, thanks to the Biden administration.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, my friend. Have a good day.